Yeah, Edward Payson Weston was called the father of modern pedestrianism, and in February 22nd of 1861, he made a $5,000 bet that he could walk from Boston to Washington, D.C. in time for Abraham Lincoln's inauguration. And he was doing pretty well till he got to Baltimore, and then he had to battle the rain and the snow. At one point he was chased by a dog, and he ended up crawling parts of the way, and he missed the inauguration by 3 hours. And that did, however, he did get into a White House visitation with the president, and the president offered to give him a ride back to Boston, but he was pretty embarrassed and pretty dejected, and so he just decided to walk back. So he ended up walking back from DC back to Boston. And he became a professional. He ended up making thousands of dollars off these long distance endurance walks. He'd make these bets. And so he made one bet where he could walk from, it was Baltimore to Cleveland, I think he was. He had to average 50 miles a day, and he won that one. And then he ended up doing some shorter walks, 100 miles in 24 hours, and he became essentially the national champion. Well, he was pretty much unchallenged until a guy named Daniel O'Leary came along. Daniel O'Leary was an Irish immigrant, and he came to America in 1866 with absolutely nothing. And he took a job selling Bibles door to door. And he thought that would give him good training to become a walker. And so he became a walker, and he started mimicking a lot of the achievements that Weston had done. And he ended up breaking a lot of his records. He ended up breaking his 100-mile record, his 20 most miles in 24-hour record, and eventually they ended up meeting in 1876, I believe it was. And O'Leary ended up beating, it was 1875, and O'Leary ended up beating him. And then they went to England and put on a performance and trounced all of the British walkers, which the British were just incensed because that was their sport. You know, it'd be like them coming over here and beating us at football or baseball or something like that. And so, but the sport had progressed over just a pretty short period of time, because when Weston started in 1861, that was really the beginning of it. And there was no real progression until he actually had a rival. And you find out early that it's these rivalries that help fuel the sport. And so when you had Weston, there was interest, it was a fascination, but it really elevated the interest when he was defeated. It's these rivalries that help fuel the sport, as it does in so many areas. And Weston went on to walk for years, and his whole purpose, besides from promoting himself, because he was a great self-promoter, was to encourage people to walk, because even back then it was understood that walking and long-distance exercise was beneficial to you. And so he would put on these performances, and a lot of times where he'd go, he was met with brass bands, and people would stand along the roads clapping as they came by, because he became such a national celebrity. He was really a big deal. He was famous, he made lots of money, and he really knew how to promote himself. He had a sewing machine company at one point support him, and they would pass out flyers advertising this sewing machine company in exchange for them putting up money for his room and food and a lot of what he needed to survive his walk. So Edward Payson Weston in all this is in many ways the most important guy, because the most important person, because without him the rest of it might not have ever happened.